Today we are going to talk about Eshean, the overtuned amalgamation of a support DPS hybrid character. Truly a golden child of Zilong's game design department, and usually units are overpowered because they do a certain thing too well, but Eshean right here does everything, and she still does them pretty well. When you look up the definition of role compression, you just see a singular word there, Eshean. And now we are going to go through her kit so you can see how bonkers this character is and hopefully learn how to get the most out of her. Her talent increases her attack and defense by 25%, so she can be built to be pretty bulky if you so choose to. Following that, at the start of the turn, you will get 1 stack of this Radiance, which goes up to 10% increased damage per stack, and it stacks up to 3 times. And this stack cannot be dispelled, however it can be immunized. So it means that if you have a unbuffable debuff, you will not be able to get this Radiance stack at the start of the turn. Or, well, you straight up can't receive it from your other skills as well. And then at the start of the turn, if your Radiance stacks have reached the maximum, which is 3 stacks, then you will clean all your stacks, it will be removed, and then it will reset all your skill cooldowns, reduced by 5 to 10. Basically, it is just a free reset on everything. And finally, we're not done yet. After taking action, you can cast this Unified Defense once, which is basically a choice of 3 skills. The first one is Revitalization. It restores your HP of the caster, which is Eshean herself, and this is 30%, although I don't know why it doesn't say here, maybe because it's too long. And then Decree basically increases the target's offensive stats, so this is just a 20% attack/in buff, and you can target Eshean herself or any of her allies, and this buff is a 3-block cast range. And for the third skill, Dash, the target gains an act again effect, which is some bullshit because this is basically the first unit since Akaya that has a act again on a unit that is not a healer archetype, and Akaya is pretty much strictly a support, so yeah, this is the first time a proper DPS is able to act against their allies. And you know, it doesn't really give too much details on the skill here, but basically this Revitalization and Decree has no cooldown. You can basically cast it at the end of every turn, but the Dash is on a 3-turn cooldown, but it's bound to the unit. So you know, this cooldown refresh here, it does not apply to the Dash. It's more like a buff counter that you'll be able to see on your hero when you use it. I'll go into more detail later when we are talking more about the stacks, because I want to, you know, talk a bit more in depth about that in conjunctions with what her skills does. So yeah, we'll just cover more on that later. Now for her skills, she will basically just always bring these 3 things together. In PvE, I guess you could forego this thing for like an extra attack, but there's really no real reason to do that because basically her skills are on a 2-turn cooldown anyway, as long as you don't spam her heal and reduce your stacks, because every time she gets to 3 stacks, she gets a cooldown refresh. So if you do the math, that's basically every 2 turns. So she doesn't really need that extra attack most of the time. So as for what these skills do, her first skill, Rainbow Sparkle, is basically just her Act Again skill. And well, not to be confused with her talent Act Again. That Act Again is for allies, this one is her own extra mobility skill. And for every 1 stack of Radiance you have while you're using this skill, you will gain 1 random buff. And this random buff actually includes certain immunities, so the pool is actually pretty big, but that also means that it can be harder to roll for a specific buff that you want. And you can move another 3 blocks after use, so basically like Chivalry. However, if this unit has 2 or more stacks of Radiance when you're using this skill, you can move an extra tile. You can move 4 blocks and attack again. So, I mean, it says attack again here, but you can also still attack when you're using it below 2 stacks. And when you're using this skill, you cannot cast her Unified Defense, which is her talent, after taking action, and any buff on the caster will not lose their turn count. So you get to keep any buffs that you have. So yeah, it's actually very just straightforward. It's just an again skill. You can gain random buffs instead of the usual like immunity or something when you use your chivalry. And then you just get 1 extra range when you are using this skill while you are at 2 or 3 stacks. Straightforward. Now, on to her second skill, Blessing of Seabreak. So before we even go to what this skill actually does, see this shit. Command. Allied units within 2 blocks are 30% less likely to be critical hit and takes 15% less range damage. This is a fucking criminal offense. This unit should not have this command. Like, so far in the game, there are only 3 units that have this command, and they are either tanks or they are a character named Landius. There's no reason for a DPS character to have this command. This command is fucking OP. 15% less range damage unconditionally, as well as 30% less critical hit chance for the enemy. So if combined with the arena stones, you basically have like a minus 50% chance, or rather you have a maximum of a 50% chance to crit. And if you don't hit crit cap, then that number is even lower. Like, again, this command should not exist on the unit. I don't know why they gave this to her. As for the skill itself, it basically upgrades your Unified Defense effect that is applied when you, at the end of this turn when you use this skill. So Revitalization gets boosted to a 80% heal, and you can now cast this skill on allied units, and this will be 3 blocks as well, same as Decree. For Decree, it will greatly increase the target's offensive and defensive stats, but it's actually just greatly increases the target offensive. So when you're using this blessing skill, you will give a 30% attack, 20% defense, and 30% magic defense buff to the target. So it's like a usual faction buff, but you get 30% attack instead of 20. And this lasts 2 turns as well. And finally, your dash gets boosted to give the target a mobility increase of 2 as well. And this mobility increase lasts for 2 turns, which is pretty insane. It's an act again plus mobility boost in 1 skill. So yeah, that's pretty egregious if you ask me. Finally, for her 3C, which is her attack skill. And she has a passive, which is basically indomitable, but you get a 30% HP instead of a 20% HP revive, as well as when you trigger this revive, you will just reset all your cooldowns, as well as remove all your radiant stacks in the process. This is both a good and a bad thing, because sometimes removing all your radiant stacks can be very griefy, but you know, this is basically triggering her talent refresh in advance when you trigger her revive. Basically, when you hit the max stack, then you will remove everything and reduce all your cooldowns. So this is basically the same thing. You will lose your stacks and you will reset your cooldown. And you know, once per battle, that's the usual thing. For the attack itself, it has a 1.3 multiplier, which is very low for a non-assassin skill. However, for every 1 stack of Radiance, this skill will deal 15% increased damage. So at 3 stack, this deals 45% increased damage, which is a lot. And then if this unit has 2 or more stacks of Radiance, the enemy will be stunned for 1 turn before battle. And this stun cannot be dispelled. So if she's not already crazy enough, you get an undispellable stun. So you can only prevent this with immunity. And yeah, it cannot be dispelled. As well as when an enemy is eliminated while you're using this attack skill, you will again reset all your radiant stacks, and all your skill cooldowns are reduced by 5 turns. And this skill has a 5 turn cooldown, so if you get a kill, you reset your cooldown instantly. And Eshean can move another 5 blocks, which is also insane, because usually other skills where you can retreat after attacking, they only give you a maximum of 3 tiles to retreat. This one gives you 5 blocks, and she's a flyer, so she doesn't care about parade. So, like, there's a lot of these insane bonus effects if you can get a kill, but if you can get a kill, this is not a balanced skill, basically. Instead of the usual unit demo, I'm just gonna yap a little bit more about what Eshean Radiant Stack does, because I think the difficult part about this unit is not what she can do. Like, what she can do is very straightforward, it just does what it says it does. But the part that is difficult about her is what should you do with her. It's basically the how. How do you use this unit properly? And to talk about that, we'll have to talk more about her Radiant stack, which is the core of all her mechanics. So immediately, this stack itself, it grants a certain percentage of damage increase, which depends on your star level, it's 10% at max, as well as a 15% damage increase on her 3C. So I include this here because like the way her cooldowns work, you will almost always be attacking with a 3C. Like, if you're not attacking with a 3C, that means she's either not a core player during that game, or you fucked up somewhere and you're probably in a bad spot. So this effectively totals to 25% damage increase per stack of Radiance, which goes up to 75 damage per stack. That is a fucking insane number to see on a unit. And you know, this is just a base kit, right? It's not, you haven't factored in any of the external damage increase or like external buffs or anything like that. So she has a 75% damage increase ceiling. Of course, you don't always attack at 3 stacks. That's actually not very easy to do. But you know, even at 2 stacks, it's 50%, and attacking at 2 stacks is very easy to do. So yeah, 50% damage increase is pretty achievable most of the time, and that is not a good thing. This unit should not have this much power. At 1 stack, she will get her 30% HP revive, which is a passive on her 3C. And then at 2 stacks, she gets both her 4 tile act again on her 1C Chivalry lookalike, as well as her undispellable stun before battle. This is also at 2 stacks. And finally, if you start a game turn at 3 stacks of Radiance, you will just turn into 0 stacks and then you will refresh all your skill cooldowns. So this one, you kind of have to pay attention a little bit, because you know, if it's not your turn priority, you basically start the turn with no revive, and you know, your Eshean can just get killed immediately. So that one you have to pay extra attention to. So how do you control your Radiance stacks? So this is, it doesn't really say this in the unit description, but you will see this when you actually click the skills in game. These are all her unified defense skills. When you use revitalization, you will get -1 stack, so you reduce your stacks. And for her other 2 skills, Decree and Dash, you'll get +1 stack after you use the skill. And this is separate from the +1 stack that you get at the start of every game round. So basically you can kind of get 2 stacks per turn if you think about it like that. And that is why you basically reset your cooldown every other turns, because the limit is 3. And if you get 2 stacks every turn, you're basically hitting the refresh every other turn. And it's important to note that it is a possible, what's it called? It's an option to not use any of these skills as well. So this is mostly useful if you want to maintain a certain number of stacks and you don't want to trigger the cooldown reduction at 3 stacks. So you can choose to not use anything as well, so you won't hit the cap when you use the buff or the egg again. And you can still use revitalization at 0 stacks. It's not a cost like a currency like Florian or CC White talent. You can still use it, but you will just stay at 0 stacks if you're at 0 stacks. So how does Eshean reset cooldown? So this unit basically has 3 ways to trigger her cooldown refresh, and all 3 of them involve resetting all of her stacks and then getting all of her cooldowns back. So the first one is getting a kill with her 3C, and then the second one is triggering her revive, and then the last one is basically having 3 stacks during the start of the game turn. So as I mentioned, all 3 stacks of triggering this cooldown reduction will remove all your Radiant stacks. However, you can decree or dash immediately after killing with your 3C, and this basically puts you back at 1 stack, which means that you can maintain your revive. And that basically goes to say that refreshing your cooldown via a kill on your 3C is objectively the best way to get the cooldown refresh, because for the start of game turn thing, you have to basically manage your turn priority, as well as the fact that this unit is actually pretty weak as a DPS when at 0 stacks, so that's not really a good thing. And triggering revive is actually kind of awkward, because now you're at 30% HP with no stacks, so you're kind of forced to just run away and heal. And then if you run away and heal, you might have to burn your your 1C act again while doing that, and then you don't have the 1C to continue being a threat, yada yada yada. So it's a bit awkward as well. So if possible, you want to always get a kill with your 3C to trigger the cooldown refresh. And if not, you just kinda have to play really far back because this unit is fucking weak at 0 stacks. And now we get to what should you be looking to do at each number of Radiant stacks. So at 0 stacks, this is basically when you just trigger your cooldown refresh. You should mostly be looking to hang back and looking to use her buff or her act again skill. And I wouldn't trust her to get any kills on anything that is not weakened or like a mage or an archer unit. And I would avoid using revitalization unless you can progress the match without her functioning as a DPS, because if you use revitalization, you're gonna just get stuck at 1 stack next turn as well. So, I mean, this is actually just a general rule I like to give myself when I play Eshean. I don't like to click this skill unless it's together with her blessing skill, because 80% heal is really good. Like a unit that is almost dead, you can pretty much bring it back to full health. But if it's not with her blessing, it's a 30% self heal, which is kind of like whatever. Usually that 30% HP will not really matter. You would need to click that skill a few times in order to get a good amount of HP restored. At that point, you might as well use your blessing, get 80%, and then reset the cooldown of your blessing, instead of clicking revitalization multiple times. So I just don't really like to use this skill without her blessing, and I'll just avoid it. At 1 stack, which is usually at the start of the match, it's more or less the same as when you have 0 stacks, but you can have slightly more confidence as a DPS if you can happen to reach anything, because you will have 25% damage increase, which is insane to say. Like I still think it's fucking insane. Like it's almost an attack blessing level of damage increase with just 1 stack. So it does really matter, like these stacks, in terms of how much your damage can go. And at 1 stack, you can look to posture aggressively, as you will be pretty strong next turn as a DPS. Like I didn't type it here, but this is basically means as a DPS. So, and this is only if you're not using revitalization. Like basically, if you either don't use any skills or if you use decree or dash, you will be at 2 to 3 stacks next turn. Means you are very strong. So at 2 stacks of Radiance, so there are a couple of things to factor in. Like I list here. Is there an available kill for you this turn? This is kind of whatever. Like if you have a kill, please take it. And then, do you need a cooldown refresh? This one is actually not too common. This is usually in like a more endgame scenario and basically a more rarer situation to run in. But this is basically something you will learn with experience. So usually the 2 things you need to think about is, do you need to be an active DPS the next turn, and do you have turn priority? And at 2 stack, this basically gives you your access to 4 blocks of act again, as well as the stun before the battle, which is why she suddenly becomes very strong at 2 stacks as a DPS, because you gain access to these 2 things. So if I want to break it down a bit further, basically, first one, if possible, let her get a kill, and this is the best situation for her to be in for the reasons that I have mentioned. If you have no available kill and you need your cooldown refreshed, you should look to retreat, and then you use her buff or act again to put you at 3 stacks at the start of next turn, which triggers her cooldown refresh, but it means that you will be very weak as a unit next turn. So if there is no kill, but you still need to remain relevant as a threat next turn, or if you need to maintain revive because you have no turn priority, then you can choose to use her revitalization or just don't click any skills because you're at 2 stacks. If you don't do anything, you will be at 3 next turn. If you use revitalization, you will be at 2 next turn as well. If you need both a cooldown refresh as well as the need to offer a threat, you're in a shit spot, and you just kind of need to make the decision if you can afford to retreat and basically be weak next turn to get the cooldown refresh, or if you have a better chance at like man fighting while maintaining your current number of stacks, because you do still get a decent amount of damage increase alone from the stacks, but that means that you cannot refresh your other skills, so you need to decide which one is more important. And if you don't need anything, you can just back off and just use your 1C. And this is important because it allows you to run your dash cooldown. So basically what this means is that since you're gonna trigger your cooldown refresh next turn anyway, you might as well just click all of your skills, just get rid of them because it's free anyway. And finally, there is the possibility of just attacking something that you can't kill, either because it's very tanky or they have a revive, and then you use your decree or dash. Same as above, this will put you at 3 stack next turn, and you will basically get your cooldown refresh. So essentially you're getting a free stun, but you do need to watch out for turn priority, because if you don't have priority and you attack someone like that, you will be on the enemy side of the map and the enemy can kill you pretty easily. However, if they don't have turn priority, this basically means that you can stun, and next turn you can probably kill and retreat as well, because you will get your 3C back, even though you don't get the refresh instantly on your attack. And finally, at 3 stacks, this is where you're the strongest, because you have fucking 75% damage increase for no apparent reason. And otherwise, the decision making is basically the same as 2 stacks, but if you somehow need to maintain your 3 stacks, you will need to click revitalization instead of doing nothing. To wrap up this section, I'm just gonna go through 2 of the more common use cases of Eshean. And the first one is her support rotation as a egregious bot. So just to kind of walk you through what it's going to look like in game, usually the first 3 turns you are able to get 2 sets of egg. So on turn 1, you start at 1 stack, you use your dash. This means that you will start next turn at 3 stacks because you get 1 stack from the dash and 1 stack from the start of next turn. And you will start next turn with a 3 turn cooldown on your dash. So next turn, you will use your 1C act again, and you will use Decree, which allows you to refresh your cooldown next turn, and it puts your dash cooldown at 1. So this is very important because you need to remember to use her 1C act again, because you get the cooldown refresh anyway, so you might as well use it, and this helps her run down her cooldown. And this is the most important thing to remember, because even me, when I first started playing, I keep forgetting to use this thing. And even now, when I play on autopilot and I stop thinking, sometimes I will forget it as well. So yeah, just remember to throw out all your skills before you hit your cooldown refresh. And now at the start of turn 3, you have refreshed your cooldown, so you can use your 1CAA, and then you will be able to use your dash again. But this will put your 1CAA on cooldown for quite a while, so you will lose quite a bit of threat range, but after this, you will be in shape to perform counter kills already. So, after that, you kind of just depends on how the game goes. But this is basically how you are going to get 2 act against within 3 turns, which is pretty insane because she can do this by herself. Normally, like anyone else that can do this will have to require like a combination of 2 units. For example, Florencia with a faction buff is able to do that because you get enough coins to support the egg against spam. Although Florencia can do it in 2 turns consecutively lah. But you need 2 units to do that. And Liana with Lucretia is also a pretty old school combo, and you can cycle your egg again pretty quickly. Like you can use egg again on turn 1 to give turn priority to the enemy, and then by cycling you can get your egg again back on turn 2. But these 2 examples will require multiple units, whereas Eshean can do it alone. And that's not to say that you have to use Eshean like this, like you have to egg again turn 1 and egg again turn 3. Sometimes it's better off to just hold off using the egg again and just use it when your team is ready, like if your team has a lot of setup units, or if you need it to react to a certain enemy move, or if you just don't want to give up turn priority, then you can just kind of use her egg again normally. You don't need to tunnel vision on getting the maximum efficiency. And this is turn 1 to 3, because usually after that the game state is usually pretty hard to determine. But within the first 3 turns, there's a pretty fair chance that the actual combat hasn't started, so you can freely set up your rotation. And that was as a support. So as a DPS, usually your power spike begins at 2 stacks, because this is where you get all your bonus stuff on your skills, like the extra 1 range as well as the stun before entering combat. But of course, you can start at a lower stack if there is an available kill, like a mage that, like a Jace that jump to your side and you just counter killing. But basically, this happens when you get a kill. Because you get a kill, you will refresh your cooldown and you will reset all your stacks, and then you will retreat after getting a kill. So when you're retreating, you can use your decree immediately after your retreat, which will put yourself back at 1 stack, activate your revive, and basically make it a very big hassle for the enemy to counter kill, because they have to chase you to your side of the map, as well as potentially expending 2 units if they don't have a unit that can kill you through your revive. And if you get away with the kill scot-free, you basically start your next turn with 2 stacks and you repeat the cycle. So this is why Eshean is pretty devastating if you don't have a tank, and she just keeps hit and run, hit and run, hit and run, and just cycles again and again. And then you just have no real counterplay. It's like playing against a lost hand, but the lost hand is killing and retreating every turn. So you just can't really win that trade because of how far she can retreat back. So you can kind of think of her as a 6 range unit, essentially, because of this retreat function. So with the most difficult part about this unit out of the way, let's just try to breeze through everything else. Class is very straightforward, very standard. Attack, HP, defense on everything, plus double suffered crit on her arena stones. This unit doesn't really play off crit damage much, and the double suffer is going to help her survivability a fair bit. Soldiers wise, Star Prisma Pegasus, which is the unit that got released with her. This will mostly be her, like 90% of the time, this will be her troop. Gives a 25% increase to attack, defense, magic defense, and when moving 3 or more blocks before attacking, the soldiers will deal 15% increased damage. Just a pretty solid damage troop overall for flyers. Her other flyer is Angels, which is a possible option to bring if you want to tank some certain mage or something. But I think if you are not running fixed immunity, this is kind of whatever, because mages by nowadays standards will be able to get through just Angels alone. You need some extra damage reduction to try and tank mages. So you can bring this if you want, but I'm not really sure if it makes a difference. Mostly you will bring this for damage. And she does have a other option, which is Unicorns. It has a better damage ceiling, provided that you're confident that you can get onto this forest, mountain or grassland. And other than that, you can bring Unicorns mostly if you want to combo with Po Liao, or if you're trying to hit something that you think will bring an infantry troop. So yeah, troops, the Pegasus and Unicorns as DPS, depends on what you want. Angels, possible option if you want to tank a mage. For her equipment, weapon wise, it will pretty much always be Ragnarok. This one, nothing has changed much since the start of the game. Ragnarok is just the objectively best weapon for a lot of these flyer characters. Armor, usually people always go with Last Rites, it's just the best general light armor. But the Shimmering Battlesuit is an option as well, because this unit has the 30% HP revive, and from now on there's going to be increasing amount of characters that have some sort of follow-up attack that can kill you through your revive. So the most recent example at the time of this video would be Isolde's 3C. So there's a extra AoE attack after she uses the 3C, which can finish off your second life if you don't have enough HP or whatever. And this Shimmering Battlesuit will basically reduce the AoE damage taken, which greatly increases your chances of surviving that follow-up attack. And other than that, it also has this built-in RNG debuff that you can give your enemy minus 20% attack and int, which can be pretty impactful in surviving if the enemy doesn't have any form of immunity. It's just RNG debuff things. For her helmet, I think most of the time you will choose to run King's Crown on this, because she's such an insanely good support that you might as well tack a 20% damage increase buff on top of that. Like, this unit can already buff attack, can buff mobility, can give act again. You might as well just throw this King's Crown on top of that. So I think that will be the best helmet for her. However, I do think that Bonnet can also be a possible option as well if you want to increase her odds at finishing fights endgame. But I think this unit is so good with King's Crown that I think the benefit of Boon Bonnet doesn't overweigh the benefit of using King's Crown, because she does tend to hang at the back a lot before she goes into attack mode, so she gets pretty insane value from her King's Crown. For the accessory, I think right now basically there are three options. You either go with Bond of Arashi, you go with SSM, or you go with an attack accessory. I just listed the Overlord's Badge there because it's the overall bulkiest attack accessory. SSM is like the standard Last Rites flyer set like Grencho uses, and this gives her pretty decent survivability because you can't break her Last Rites. However, Bond of Arashi is gaining traction as an accessory because Eshean has a stun, so if you get into an Eshean versus Eshean matchup, the anti-stun can actually make a very big difference because you basically can cast your skills next turn and you can either heal up or just stun the Eshean back. So, however, if you are using the if you are using any non-SSM accessories, then Last Rites actually kind of just decrease in value nowadays because most of the DPS nowadays, you can actually have some way of breaking your Last Rites either via Ragnarok or via Twilight Star. Either that or they just don't care about Last Rites because they have an overwhelming amount of damage. So yeah, that's just something to keep in mind if you are not planning to use SSM. And other than that, for attack accessory, I would actually recommend that if you are having a low star Eshean, because if you use Arashi or SSM at low star, your attack stat can get kind of sus, and then you will run into situations where you just fail kill everything. So you can just use the attack accessory first and graduate into one of the non-attack accessories as your star increases. For enchant, I think for this unit it's always Breeze because her threat range can get pretty ludicrous with the Breeze, and without it's just 5+4 with a 1 block attack range, which is just barely passable at 10 for nowadays standards, so I think she just needs Breeze. If you want to build her as like a very tanky unit, of course you can use Full Moon because she does have the defense boost in talent, but that's more like a stall specialist kind of build. Otherwise, Breeze is just generally better. And that being said, that will be it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.